Okay, 8th graders, this lesson, 1-7b, using the order of operations with exponents, will build on lesson 1-7a, which was expressions with exponents. Just to review the order of operations, or PEMDAS, parentheses or grouping symbols are always done first. Remember that grouping symbols may also include brackets, and possibly even absolute value symbols, although this lesson probably won't have too many absolute value symbols. However, we did not work with the E the last time we did order of operations. This time we will, of course, because we will be working with exponents. Then we multiply and divide in order from left to right. And our last step is to go through and look for addition and subtraction in order from left to right. In our first example, we do have parentheses around the multiply. So that has to be done before we do the exponents. We copy the rest of the problem. 2 times 5 is 10. And then we're going to square that. Now going back to that order of operations, we now have to do the exponentiation before we can do the subtraction. So we will have 26 minus 100. Now, these are integers, so you're going to have to deal with your integer rules. This says 26 minus 100. We add the opposite. So our answer is going to be negative 74. In example B, we have to do the exponentiation before we do any division or multiplication. So we will have negative 4 divided by 6 times 3 squared is 9. At this point, we have to go back to the M and D step of order of operations, and we have to work from left to right. Therefore, we are going to start with negative 4 divided by 6. Now, this is where the book assumes that you remember how to do this from last year. Negative 4 divided by 6 is going to be negative 4 over 6, which equals negative 2 over 3, then times 9 over 1. The 3 and the 9 will reduce to 1 and 3. So we now have negative 2 times 3, which is negative 6. In example C, we need to do the exponentiation first. 6 plus 4 squared is 16 minus 7 times 3. If you remember when we did law of order of operations last time, I told you be careful not to try to do too much in one step. So if you only make one change or so in every step, it might take you a while to do the problem, but you're going to be more likely to get it right, at least until you build your confidence. Since we've done exponentiation, we now look for multiplication and division. So we're going to take the 6 plus 16 minus 7 times 3 is 21. Now we need to take the addition and subtraction in order from left to right. 6 plus 16 is 22, minus the 21 gives us an answer of 1. With a problem like D, you can work both above the division bar and below the division bar at the same time, if you would like. Otherwise, some people like to just work on the top part first and then the bottom part. I'm actually going to work both above and below the division bar at the same time. 6 minus negative 3 squared. Now remember from the last lesson, this means negative 3 times negative 3. So that's going to be positive 9. Then our division bar. 4 squared is 16 minus the 13. Working above the division bar, 6 minus 9. Add the opposite. Will be negative 3. I don't usually change 16 minus 13 to add the opposite because 16 minus 13 is math like you've done since you were quite young. 16 minus 13 is 3. Now I can reduce it to its lowest terms. Negative 3 divided by 3 is negative 1. To evaluate each expression, just like in the past, you're going to substitute for the variable. 5 times negative 2 to the third power. Here again, based on the lesson you had before this one, this means we need to take negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2. Remember, when the negative is inside the parentheses, that means you need to take a negative integer. So negative 2 times negative 2 is 4, times negative 2 is negative 8. That means we are going to have 5 times negative 8, which will then equal negative 40. In B, we substitute, so we're going to have 5 times negative 2, and then take it to the third power. 5 times negative 2 is going to be negative 10 to the third power. Negative 10 times negative 10 times negative 10. Remember, if we take a negative integer to an odd numbered exponent, our answer will be negative. Negative 10 times negative 10 is 100, and 100 times negative 10 will give us an answer of negative 1,000. Letter C. 6 times negative 2 squared minus the 25. 6 times negative 2 is negative 12 squared minus 25. Negative 12 squared, negative 12 times negative 12. That's going to be positive 144 minus 25. Now when you go back and do the subtraction, you will get 119. There will be story problems utilizing exponents. The distance traveled by a skydiver before opening the parachute depends on the time he or she waits before pulling the cord. The formula is d equals 16 times t squared, where d will be the distance and t is the time. How far will a skydiver fall in 5 seconds? They are giving you a formula here. And generally speaking, if they give you a formula, they expect you, and I expect you, to put that down as your very first step. The formula is d equals 16 times t squared. The question is asking how far. Distance is talking about far, so I do not know d. 16 times T stands for time. My time is 5 seconds. 16 times 5 squared. Our order of operations tells us that we have to take the 5 squared first. 5 squared is 25. The next thing we look for is multiplication and division. That's all I have left here is multiplication. 16 times 25 gives us 400. And we can assume here, even though they don't tell you what the label is, we can assume that that's going to be in feet this time. And that concludes the lesson on using exponents with the order of operations.